All right, let's get into it. Let's look at the NBA's recent investigation of the New York Knicks and the Philadelphia 76ers. Let's start with the Knicks. At the start of free agency, Jalen Brunson signed with the New York Knicks for 4 years, $104 million. And you're just thinking that's basically at 6:01, I believe, as the deadline started. And they just was like, hey, we're just going to sign with the Knicks. That's usually what happened the past couple of years. As soon as the deadline hit, you hear, even before, you hear about deals being made and terms being met. So that's normal. But the Knicks have left a paper trail where it looks like the league can now step in and look at what's going on here if something was happening. It all started with the Knicks towards the end of their season. They didn't make the playoffs nor the play-in. They hired Rick Brunson. Now, Rick Brunson is Jalen Brunson's father. And, okay, that happens in the league. Teams did it. They hire known affiliates or friends or family members. The Wizards did it, I believe, in 2016 when they tried to lure Kevin Durant to the Wizards. I think they hired like a guy from his high school coach or a friend or something like that at that time. But they hired Jalen Brunson's dad, Rick Brunson. Now, Rick Brunson has a connection with Leon Rose, who runs things for the New York Knicks as well. Rick Brunson was, as an agent, Leon Rose's first client. So they've been family friends for a while now, and that's just the connection that they have there. But another thing that the Knicks have done, they had Worldwide West, Allen Houston, executives for the New York Knicks, and Julius Randle, a player currently under contract, go to game one between the Mavericks and Jazz in this recent playoff. And you're like, okay, players usually go to games, whatever the case may be. Executives might be in the crowd or whatever. They usually send scouts or whatever the case may be. But this was, I believe they were behind the Mavericks bench, which is weird. And obviously they're scouting Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell potentially. So there's a little bit of tampering in that you could see there. And I think what helps the Knicks in this case is that Rick Brunson was an assistant underneath Thibs in Chicago and Minnesota in the past. Thibs lost, I believe, what's the guy's name? They lost Mike Woodson, and they also lost, let me get the name here before I mess that up. Mike Woodson, who was an assistant, he took the coaching job at Indiana. And there was another guy, I believe he coaches Louisville right now. I just can't find the name. So he lost those guys and hasn't replaced them. So towards the end of the season, he gets Rick Brunson. Now, I understand there's some tampering there that you could look at and be like, hey, that's his dad. Jalen Brunson just signed his contract. Okay, we put two and two together. But this guy does have an assistant history. He did coach with Thibs in Chicago and in Minnesota. So it's like, okay, I don't see the big deal. He's getting an assistant coach. There's some familiarity there between the two. But ultimately, why is this a big deal? Jalen Brunson is a free agent. He had his contract obligations to the Mavericks. He was a free agent and signed with the New York Knicks. Did the New York Knicks do a little positioning? Yeah, but what team doesn't? So is tampering in terms of clearing cap space, is that going to be tampering? Hiring anybody in any 6 degree separation between a player, a coach, a trainer, et cetera, is that now going to be looked at as tampering? And where's the cutoff for the Knicks? I just don't see this as a big problem for the Knicks in terms of their history. It wasn't like they stole Jalen Brunson from the Mavericks. The Mavericks had every opportunity to sign Jalen Brunson at the start of the season. They had an opportunity to offer him 4 years, $75 million, and they didn't. Jalen Brunson outplayed that contract, and the Mavericks couldn't offer him anymore towards free agency. So it's like, what's the issue here? I don't see the issue for the Knicks. Did the Knicks do a little positioning? Yes. But in this day and age, it isn't like, I just don't see that as a big problem. The NBA doing this, looking into what teams are doing. Now, let's talk about Philadelphia, the 76ers. Before the start of free agency, James Harden opted out of his $47 million deal. Okay, normally that's what players do when they have a big deal and there's more money on the table going forward. But at the start of free agency, they signed P.J. Tucker, 3 years, $33 million. And they signed Danuel House, 2 years, $8.4 million. Okay. Team signing guys out of free agency usually happen. You need role players, especially in Philadelphia's case. And it was about a month later that they signed James Harden to $68 million extension. Why is the NBA looking at this? I mean, a player positioning himself to help his team long term, help his team to make a playoff push, a championship push. That's what Philadelphia is playing for. So why is a player taking less money to basically stay with his team and help his team financially? Why is that an issue? I don't see that as an issue. Tom Brady's been doing it in football for years. Dirk Nowitzki did it in Dallas. Tim Duncan did it in San Antonio. Is that tampering? If you're creating more cap space for your team in order to have a better chance to win, is that tampering? If LeBron James started taking $1 million deals and they signing free agents, would that be tampering? I don't think so. I just don't see how this is an issue here for the Philadelphia or the Knicks. I just don't see how that's an issue. So Jalen Brunson basically coming in underneath his family friend of history there is tampering? How is that tampering? He wasn't under contract. He was a free agent. James Harden opting out, taking less money to help his team win in the position to win. How is that tampering? I think that's just smart business. Now, did they offer anything illegally to these guys? No. James Harden taking less money to stay with Philly and have a better chance to win a championship, better depth on the team. I don't see an issue with that. That's how a sport should work. Sacrifice. Now, is he going to probably try to get more money on the back end of the deal? Probably, yeah. But this isn't a Joe Smith situation where the Timberwolves signed him for like $3 million, way underneath what he was worth. And then a wink deal, when his deal was up, they were going to offer him more money just for like cap restrictions. And the league basically ruined KG's time in Minnesota for that. I think they lost like 6 first-round picks or something like that, and that's why after those seasons, I think like after the 2003 season, they had limited cap space. They had no picks to trade to better position themselves to continue that championship run. And that was tough for KG in Minnesota. I don't think any tampering should happen like to that degree where the league comes down and really hits the hammer. And they've been very lenient with past tampering. So I don't understand why they're trying to act like this is a big deal. Let's just look at some of the instances that happened in the past here. In 2010, Dan Gilbert hired a law firm to investigate, basically looking into LeBron James going to Miami as a free agent with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and all that stuff like that. He actually hired a law firm to look into that, and the league basically said nothing's there. LeBron basically going back to Cleveland his second stint, and then already having traded Andrew Wiggins for Kevin Love in the wings. Is that tampering? Did the other teams know? Whatever the case may be, nothing happened there. Chandler Parsons going to Dallas was heavily looked at as tampering, as Mark Cuban and Chandler Parsons were in the club looking at each other and basically partying with each other, and he signed there. There was also Chandler Parsons being boys with DeAndre Jordan, and we all know that, where the Clippers basically had to kidnap DeAndre Jordan after agreeing to a qualifying offer with the Dallas Mavericks there. And basically the Clippers convinced him to come back. Probably something that they should have just let go in terms of where the NBA was heading in terms of at that time. I know DeAndre Jordan, I think he made the NBA All-Team, third team, I think, that year too. So I understand it from the Clippers' perspective, you don't want to lose an asset, but for the team probably going forward, that was probably a better move just to let him go. But they literally kidnapped him, basically had him ducking Chandler Parsons and Mark Cuban's calls. And a pretty funny story that's just hilarious. Nothing happened there. We continue to go back to Kevin Durant signing with Golden State in 2016. And everyone was like, how is that tampering? Basically, we found out that Draymond Green called after Game 7 of the NBA Finals, after losing the Game 7 in the NBA Finals to Cleveland, basically calling Kevin Durant saying, hey, man, we need you out here. We need you out here. And we all know that he signed there. But people say tampering happened before that when after a game, I believe, for OKC, they were flying to Phoenix. And Kevin Durant made a detour to the Super Bowl, saying he wanted to be a photographer and all that. And Steph Curry and Draymond Green were at the game. Now, that's where initially everyone said the tampering happened, and that's where the seeds were planted for Kevin Durant going to Golden State. And it seemed like it was true because at the start of the season, Russell Westbrook had the photographer get up on as a fashion intro to the game, and Russ basically said, "Hey, I went to Spain, saw a photographer out there with this on, and I bought it." Okay, cool, whatever. But then you hear all the stories there, the details coming out. Like that's when Russ was basically sending subliminals towards Kevin Durant and Golden State. Like I know what happened. I basically know when they roped you in. I basically know what happened. But the only real time recently the league has come down on tampering was in 2017 when Paul George, I think he was on Jimmy Kimmel while still in Indiana under contract, basically openly saying, "Hey, I want to play for the Lakers." Basically, I want to play for the Lakers, and whatever something happened there was some type of agreement or whatever the case may be. The league fined them $500K for basically talking to Paul George and trying to get him to come to LA. Okay, that's one thing. And now recently when the Heat and the Bulls, the Heat respectively talking to Kyle Lowry in free agency and getting him to go there, the league popped him for a second round pick. Also with the Bulls with Lonzo Ball, they popped the Bulls with the second round pick, losing a second round pick. So I don't know how much tampering they can stop here, or if the penalty is going to be a second round pick. How valuable is that in the league today? We see guys holding out for first round picks, even not so great players, average players, getting late first round picks or whatever the case may be. That's just the cost of business. Second round picks can kind of sweeten the deal, but they're not the end all be all, especially in this league right now. So if the tampering rule isn't going to be enforced where you're losing multiple first round picks, you're losing cap space in some type of regard of that. I think the NFL does that where they take multiple picks from you. I think first round, third round picks, whatever the case may be. But if that's not going to happen where they're taking multiple first round picks from you or lowering your cap in that regard, where the penalty for tampering would be higher, I just don't see how this is going to stop a team. If we're going to lose a couple second round picks, why not talk to that guy that's going to bring me 10 extra wins a season and get me into a better playoff position, bring more revenue into my stadium, in my arena? How is that going to be bad for me? You lose a second round pick. Second round picks most of the time don't make the team. They're usually in the G League going back and forth. Outside of Nikola Jokic, unless you're going to find that guy in the second round, I don't think it's a bad deal. If we're going to lose a second round pick, I would do that 10 times out of 10. That's not a loss to me as an NBA franchise. That's not a loss to me, especially when I have my first round pick. If the NBA started taking away first round picks like they did with Minnesota, but they basically probably don't want to handicap a team like that in today's age. And maybe it's the market of these teams. These are big media market teams. Maybe they don't want to hit them over the head with that like they did Minnesota way back in the day with Joe Smith. Who knows? Who knows? But I just feel like the tampering rule in the NBA is so... It's wasted. It's wasted. And just as an update to who that other guy was for the Knicks that they lost as an assistant was Kenny Payne. He went to Louisville. But in terms of tampering, I just don't see it being effective in the league right now, in the NBA. Because tampering, you can say, happens on every call, every day going on in the league. Guys are talking to each other. They can't stop that. That's what Dan Gilbert was trying to stop in 2010. Players talking to each other during free agency. Like he was looking at a way to see if that can renege a deal or get more assets back in that ultimate trade for LeBron James between Cleveland, Miami, and stuff like that. He was literally looking for a way to say, hey, these guys can't do this. Is there any way we can stop this? Guys are going to talk to each other. Agents are going to talk to each other. GMs, executives, they're going to talk to each other, and it's happening all the time. All hours of the day. All hours of the day. Like, it's going to happen in the league, and I just don't see the league being able to stop this unless there's serious ramifications for tampering, actual tampering, and actually getting receipts and documentation. Like they're looking into the Knicks with Rick Brunson. They're trying to get documentation or find text messages or emails as some type of exchange or conversations going on between these two guys saying, hey, this is where we can pop you guys. Okay, fine. And if Jalen Brunson adds to me getting a better chance in the playoffs, being savvy in New York, and I hired his dad, and I lose a second round pick, what's the problem with that? I don't see that as a loss for the New York Knicks at this point in time. Nor do I see James Harden taking less money to bring in more help for Philadelphia, especially when it's PJ Tucker's 37 years old. At the end of his contract, he's going to be 40. And Danuel House, a young shooter. Daryl Morey basically building the Rockets again from 2018. Those are the moves that are considered tampering. I don't see it. I just don't see it. Very, very, very awkward that the league is choosing these situations to try to be like, hey, we're going to stop tampering. I don't think that's the issue in the league. I thought the issue in the league was officiating, and I felt like they addressed that this past season. But tampering, I don't see that as a problem in the NBA.